Alright, now that you've assembled all of your panels together, the next thing I do before you put any screen onto them is to get your holes drilled for the whole thing to be assembled together. It's better to do this before you put the screen on, because once the screen is on, these are difficult to work with drilling holes. You can't grab the whole structure like this and get everything square and hold it together if there's screen here. You have to hold it like this, and it wants to fall in itself. You can't reach through. If you can hold the thing like this and drill your holes, you'll get the whole thing a lot more. All these pieces can be flush. If not, you might have them have gaps and spaces. I learned this through trial and error, so it's best to drill your holes before you put the screen on, and that's what we're going to do. Another thing I do, I label on the inside of each panel which piece it's going to be. For example, this is my top. I label this as front top, rear top, left top, right top, and then you do the same with the side. Label each one, because you drill your holes, then you take the whole thing apart to put the screen on before you screw it all together. And when you take all the screws back out, if you don't label which pieces is what, each hole is obviously custom drilled in itself, and you won't be able to line them up. You'll be trying to line screw holes up, and it's just easier if you label it ahead of time. That way, once you put all the screen on, you can just put them back together and all the holes line up perfectly that you pre-drilled into it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to label each panel, and then we're going to tape the whole frame together with some packing tape, and we'll start drilling holes to assemble the frame. Alright, I've labeled all my pieces, all my panels, and I've taped the whole thing together with some 3M packing, clear packing tape. I've got it all taped together where it needs to be. Now that the frame is held together and you can reach around and make adjustments so that all these panels are flush, we can then drill the holes. That's why you do this before you put the screen on, because once the screen is on, you can't reach through to push this frame out to make sure they're flush if they're not lining up properly. It's just a lot easier. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start drilling some of the pilot holes, and I tape everything together. I don't know if you can see this up close or not. Just make sure everything, all these pieces are flush, both top, bottom, and sides. Once it's squared up and you're confident that it's together as straight as you can possibly get it, just put a couple of drill a few pilot holes into each side and work your way around until you have the whole thing drilled out. And what I typically do is I'll drill the middle panel, or the center screw, and I'll go ahead and place a screw inside of it, and then with that screw holding it in place, I then drill the other two pilot holes. That way, when you put the whole thing back together after you've took it apart and screened it, all the holes are going to line up perfectly. That's why you label everything. So when you put all this back together, you have no problem. They just line up perfectly. So let's start drilling some holes. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and drill this center pilot hole here for one of the screws. And you'll be using your 1/8 inch drill bit to put the holes in for the screws. When you put them in, you got to make sure that you're doing it kind of along the edge so that it goes through to the next panel. Don't do it dead center. Make sure that it's going straight through. So go ahead and put one of these in. I typically just gently get the first hole going until I pop through. Alright, now that I've popped through, being able to reach through, I pull these two frames together so that they're completely flush. Hold it very tight. There you go. You take your 18 size metal screws, they're self-tapping. I use the kind that use a 1/4 inch socket head. It's a lot easier to me than a screwdriver. Phillips heads tend to strip out. Drill that first hole, get one screw in, and when you put the screws in, be careful, don't over tighten them, because this aluminum is very soft and you'll crimp it in. Just till you feel it bite and get a little tight. That's all you need. Okay, the whole frame is put together now. It's still taped together, as you can see, but each portion now, I've put the center screw, and with the center screw intact, I went ahead and I drilled the rest of the holes. I did this all the way around, front and back, or the rear panel. But all the holes are drilled now. I went ahead and I taped the lower panel. This panel right here is not going to be screwed under the cage. I'm going to explain it later. This panel will be removable so that you can clean the cage out. Makes it a lot easier when you can open the bottom of it up and clean it out. But what we're going to hit on now is the last two pieces of aluminum screen frame that you should have, and it's going to be your 35 and 5/8 inch piece and your 27 and 3/16 each piece. The longer one, or the 35 one, it's going to be your door stop. The shorter 27 and 3/16 piece is going to be your hinge piece, where the door hinge actually attaches to the cage. So we'll get started on assembling those. It's the same process basically. We're just going to line them up in here and drill pilot holes for them. Alright, we're going to start with the hinge piece. What we're going to do is, I take the side of the frame that has the track hole for your spline, and I face it on the inside. What you're going to want is this nice square portion of it is going to be what butts up against the side here. So you've got a wide contact point for your screw to go in. But this 27 and 3/16 inch piece should slide right in there like that. What this does, this creates a space for your hinge to fit onto. The hinge will not fit onto this small side segment, so we attach this on here, and you'll be able to attach your hinges to there. You do the same thing on the opposite side. You put the spline track on the inside, your wide edge on the side touching the frame, and this is going to go in to the rear half of it. And what this is a door stop. This is so that when the door is in place, when it closes, the door doesn't swing all the way into the rest of the cage. It stops right here, and you're able to lock the door shut. So basically just set these pieces in here, do the same thing we did before, drill some pilot holes, screw one of them in, get your rest of your holes drilled, and we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be placing the screen inside to each one of these panels. Okay, next portion of it is applying the screen into each one of the frames. This is probably the most tedious part of this entire project. I don't want to call it difficult, but it can be rather challenging. There's variables that you got to control. For example, you don't want your screen to be really loose, but at the same time, you don't want to put it in too tight. If you put it in too tight, it can bend the frames in, and it can cause all of your panels to be shaped strange. I've got one cage that I learned through trial and error. Keep it, don't let it be too loose, but at the same time, don't leave it extremely too tight. It's just, there's a middle ground that you got to kind of achieve with it. There's no real rule of thumb on how to do that. So we're going to start with just doing the small panel, and we'll run through the whole process that I use to get the screen into each one of the frames.